Good morning. As Post Commander, I'd like to welcome you to our Memorial Day program. It's an honor to be here with you today as we come together to remember those that gave their lives while defending our country. It is also a day to remember all those that have served and are now deceased. I'll ask you to please rise for the presentation of our colors.
Sergeant at Arms, present colors. Hand salute.
Hand feet. Color bear. Forward. Whoop. Detail, hoop. Place colors.
2. And I'll call on Chaplain Les to offer prayer.
O God of nations and of men, we pause to acknowledge your power over our lives. Instill in our hearts the desire to serve our community in such a way as to ensure freedom, further justice, and encourage democracy. We ask your blessings on this memorial service and to look with favor upon the hearts of those gathered here to pay tribute to those who have made the supreme sacrifice for the benefit of free men everywhere. May all that is said and done in our service today be pleasing to you, O Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Les.
I'll now call upon Commander Gagne to place into the wreath. Please join the Star Spangled Banner.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fights o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still
You may be seated. This year, Memorial Day looks a little bit different than in years past. We are, I think, fortunate in some ways as a nation that with all the distractions surrounding us, that we come together to remember the importance of this day means to those that sacrifice, those that served alongside them, and those families that survived them. It is a privilege we live in this country, thanks to the sacrifices so many generations of men and women have made on our behalf. I thank you for thinking of our veterans today and for help honor our fallen. At this time, I'm going to say a few thank yous and give a couple announcements before turning it over to Commander Clarence. First, I'd like to thank you, the audience, for making this memorial program an honor to be part of. Second, the Legion Color Guard. Your presence today and the flag placements at the cemeteries to honor our fallen comrades are commendable. Third, the Second Lieutenant Kaylee Escalay for speaking with us today. And last, for Commander Clarence for reading of our fallen comrades, 383. While staying within the guidelines, we will not have a lunch and fellowship following the program. But we are planning a flag retiring ceremony June 14th in the afternoon. It's a Sunday afternoon, and it's going to be around 5 o'clock. We hope to have a lunch and fellowship to follow. I ask you all to please make plans to attend. With that, I'll turn this program over to Commander Gagne.
Thank you, Commander Holmes. Is this coming through on the other side? Okay. I just want to make sure everyone can hear. It is my distinct pleasure this morning to introduce our guest speaker. We are so privileged to have someone like this within our community. She is a graduate from our local RLCC high school in 2016. And after her high school graduation, she was selected and went directly to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado. She became, while being a student at Colorado Springs in the Air Force Academy, she became a flight commander and also a squadron commander. She did this along with winning 5 national rugby championships while she was at the academy. This past year, on April 18th, 2020, she graduated from the academy with honors. In mid-June, our guest, Lieutenant Kaylee Escalay, will be assigned to Luke Air Force Base in Glendale, Arizona. And there she will begin flight training on the F-35A aircraft with the 63rd Fighter Squadron. I would like everybody to please welcome our speaker today, Second Lieutenant Kaylee Escalay.
Thank you, Commander. Thank you for the awesome introduction. And thank you, everyone, for having me here today as your speaker. This is a program that I grew up going to, and it's really an honor to be able to stand here on the other side as a speaker today. So thank you for having me. So today, we have an awesome opportunity to celebrate and honor those who have fallen on Memorial Day. Though we as Americans often take the freedoms, comforts, and blessings of our everyday lives for granted, Memorial Day provides us the opportunity to thank those who have ensured these things for us, these freedoms, comforts, and blessings. It provides us the opportunity to reflect on the courage of all service members, including the courage of our loved ones who have passed, and especially those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. to go to our local cemetery and to pick up the fallen over and slouching veteran signs, to post flags and flowers, and to don a red poppy in remembrance, and to read and hear the stories of servicemen and women who we've lost in the line of duty. Though I've only been in the service for 4 years, all of which have been spent at the Air Force Academy, preparing to lead airmen and earning my bachelor's degree, I am proud to have commissioned into the United States military because of the legacy that those before me have prepared. As a future Air Force pilot, I've especially found great inspiration, as well as an extreme amount of gratitude, from the trailblazing pilots who have paved the way for my generation's experience of military aviation and U.S. air superiority. However, this path was not easily paved, and was too often at the expense of pilots' lives. I've had the great opportunity to hear the stories of many fallen airmen, oftentimes at the Academy, from their family members and from those who witnessed the fall of their comrades firsthand. Today, I would like to share some of these stories with you all, to honor their legacy, as well as to share with you just a hint of what Memorial Day means to me. The first story I'd like to tell is that of arguably the most infamous Academy graduate, Lieutenant Lance Syjon. Lieutenant Syjon graduated from the Air Force Academy in 1965 and went to pilot training immediately afterwards. After completing pilot training, Lieutenant Syjon, at the age of 25, was deployed to his first duty station in Da Nang, Vietnam, where he was assigned to the F-4C fighter aircraft. On November 9th, Lieutenant Syjon and his front seat pilot, Lieutenant Colonel John Armstrong, were flying a night mission when their aircraft exploded. It is assumed that a defective fuse led their aircraft's bomb payload to detonate prematurely. Fortunately, Lieutenant Syjon was able to eject from the aircraft, but unfortunately, Lieutenant Colonel Armstrong, his front seat pilot, was not. The combination of the explosion of his aircraft, the ejection, and the impact with the mountain below him left Lieutenant Syjon badly injured. He had a compound fracture of his left leg, a skull fracture, and a bad concussion. His right hand was completely mangled, fingers bent backwards. Syjon was unconscious or delirious for that night and all the next day. Lieutenant Syjon, upon regaining consciousness, evaded the enemy for 46 days in the Vietnam wilderness. That is 6 weeks, despite his injuries and despite losing his survival kit in the explosion. Lieutenant Syjon had no real food and little water. He subsisted on ferns, press leaves, moss, grubs, and insects. He obtained water from the dew, rainfall, and occasionally a mountain stream. Despite this, he crawled 3 miles to the road where he was ultimately captured. When he was finally captured, he weighed only 80 pounds. And, 80 pounds is really something, as he was previously a football player at the Air Force Academy, weighing 210 pounds. He's 6'2". Yet, despite his extreme conditions and his significant weight loss, he was still able to disable one of his guards upon his capture and crawled back into the jungle. He avoided being recaptured for several hours. Once found again, Syjon was sent to and tortured in Halalo prison. Fellow prisoners heard him and knew he gave away no information, in keeping with the Armed Forces Code of Conduct, but he was badly hurt. However, Syjon was once again able to escape from prison by overcoming another guard, only to be found 12 hours later. Syjon told fellow prisoners of war his tale and asked for their help in escaping a third time, but he was unfortunately too badly injured and sick to survive. His captors removed him from his cell, and Syjon died the next day, on January 22nd, 1968. Lieutenant Syjon was listed as missing in action for the next 7 years. The Air Force and his family did not learn what had become of him until the prisoners of war returned from North Vietnam in 1973. He was the first Air Force Academy graduate awarded the Medal of Honor. Lieutenant Syjon's sister came to talk to cadets at the Academy each year I was there. She always reminded us of the importance of sharing these stories of courage and complete heroism of those who gave their lives in the line of duty. Yes, on Memorial Day, but on every other day as well. Another story is that of Captain David Lyon, a 2008 grad of the Academy who was killed when a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device, an IED, was detonated near his convoy. He was one of 10 killed in the attack, along with 2 NATO military personnel and 7 Afghan forces. I had the honor of having this story told to me by his widow, Major Retired Dana Lyon, who was my athletic trainer while at the academy. Despite her obvious pain in remembering, she never missed an opportunity to tell her late husband's story or to do a hero workout in his honor. Like the story of Captain Victoria Pickney and Captain Mark Tyler Voss, I had the honor of sharing a rugby jersey with Captain Pickney, who, on May 3rd, launched a mission to refuel U.S. warplanes over Afghanistan using her KC-135 Stratotanker. A problem with the plane's flight control system caused the aircraft to begin violently yawing back and forth before eventually ripping the airplane's tail off 3 miles above Kyrgyzstan's Himalayan foothills. Because the tail was ripped off, the plane quickly entered into a steep dive, dooming all 3 on board, who unfortunately did not have parachutes to eject. And lastly, like Second Lieutenant Travis B. Wilkie, a 2018 Air Force Academy graduate and a gifted student in pilot training flying the T-38C aircraft, who, along with his instructor pilot, Lieutenant Colonel John Matt Kincaid, underwent a malfunction during landing this past year on November 21st, 2019, and they both died upon impact. Lieutenant Wilkie trained me and many other cadets during basic cadet training. He taught us important military knowledge topics and led us through many physical training exercises. He lived completely by the Air Force core values and was an extremely honorable man. Lieutenant Wilkie and Lieutenant Colonel Kincaid are remembered on Memorial Day for the first time this year. It was truly a humbling experience to train, study, as well as play in the same halls as these graduates who made the ultimate sacrifice. And at every duty station I'm assigned to from here on out, starting at Luke Air Force Base in Glendale, Arizona, I look forward to continue learning the stories of the servicemen and women who made the ultimate sacrifice and who I will once again be completely honored to share training and operating grounds with. When it was my turn to lead basic cadets through 6 weeks of training as their training cadre, no matter how difficult we made it on them during the day, making them recite a ton of knowledge, do a lot of push-ups and other exercises. 20 minutes before taps at the end of the day, we always made them get perfectly cleaned up and presentable and stand at attention outside their doors, or later, their tent doors. Myself and other training cadre took turns telling them stories of servicemen and women who had passed in the line of duty, reminding them that many, like Lieutenant Saijan, were only a few years older than they were when they passed. I remember their attention always intently following us, despite their exhaustion, despite the fact that they had heard many stories already. However, we need not be at basic cadet training to hear and tell these stories, to remember the fallen and to honor them daily. The airmen who I've spoke of today comprise just a few of the stories that we must tell. And now that you've heard them, you may pass them on too, in addition to the stories of those important in your lives who have passed in the line of duties. Though they are no doubt painful to hear, they are necessary to hear in order to keep their memories alive. We must remain grateful for the things we often take for granted as Americans, and by hearing these stories, I believe we can remain grateful. I would like to close with a thank you to the men and women of Red Lake County who have served and who are currently serving in the military. Thank you for your commitment to your country and for raising your right hand and promising to protect and defend the United States at the cost of your life if need be. We are eternally grateful for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lieutenant Escalay, for being with us, and thank you for that wonderful presentation. Prior to the reading of the names of our people who have gone before us, I'd like to just make one announcement. I hope that you can try to make yourselves as comfortable as you can. I don't care if you move around, sit on the curb, sit on the grass, whatever it takes, and we do apologize for not having chairs for everyone on the other side. But once again, we will start, and it does take a little bit of time, and we're going to read off the names of those people in our local cemeteries that have gone before us. So from the Plummer Catholic Cemetery, St. Vincent de Paul, our auxiliary is Catherine Bernier, Matilda Doran, Monica Fallon, Jan Freitag, Barbara Girardi, Margaret Greenwald, Ann Yeager, Helen Yeager, Nadine Johnson, Bertha Lemieux, Carrie Manny, and Leroy Manny, Dagny Paulin, Anna Raberts, Elizabeth Wisterman, Martha Walker, and Tekla Willett. From the Legion, Frank Berg, Jerome Bernier, Roger Bernier, Benny Carpenter, Joe Fallon, Walter Girardi, Howard Greenwald, Omer D. Guillemette, Omer O. Guillemette, Edmund Hemley, James Jackson, Joseph Yeager, Matt Yeager, Nick Yeager, Elvin Johnson, John Maney, Henry Monin, Raymond Paris, Raymond Parody, Wilford Raberts, Emil Singer, Leonard Singer, Gerald Toulouse, Lowell Toulouse, Cornelius Van Litt, Bruce Walker, Delmaine Walker, George Walker, Leslie Walker, Martin Walker, Rex Walker, Robert Walker, Jim Willett, and Joseph Willett. From Emmerdville Lutheran Cemetery, our auxiliary, Clara Anderson, Vivian Cleland, Sheila Erickson, Asta Fossum, Darlene Freiholtz, Helen Hansen, Clara Hemley, Hilma Hempstead, Clara Hess, Wilfred Burstead Johnson, Maria Kella, Arlene Kelly, Bernice Lafayette, Josephine McCready, Ethel Milligan, Dorothy Myrie, Ragna Norby, Minnie Peterson, Sylvia Peterson, Sigveld Johanna Radell, Charlotte Polly Shervin, Asta Westerlin, Anna Wickstrom. And from the Legion, Burton Amundsen, Clarence Anderson, Thomas Broughton, Burton Carlson, Eugene Carpenter, Matt Christensen, Albert Doye, Floyd Fredrickson, Ronald Freiholtz, Bruce Fritz, Henry Froylan, Philip Froylan, Oscar Hamram, Harold Hansen, John Hempstead, Art Johnson, Henry Morris Johnson, Elson Lafayette, Howard Lafayette, Oli Matson, Jimmy Meyer, Lawrence Mickelson, Don Nelson, George Nelson, Willard Nelson, Lester Norby, Thomas Norby, Vernon Noterman, August Peterson, Lawrence Peterson, Leonard Peterson, Walter Riddell, Aaron Seibel, Paul Tillman, Wayne Tronis, Leroy Westerlin, Roy Westlake, Gus Wickstrom, Oscar Wickstrom, Bert Wright, William Wright. And from the Brooks Catholic Cemetery, St. Joseph's, our auxiliary members, Verla Aslan, Veronica Bushy, and Gabrielle Gabby Mersil. From the Legion, Stephen Aslin, Orvido Berry, Leonard Bushy, Frank Burgess, Daniel Brueggemann, Eugene Brueggemann, Frank Brueggemann, Lloyd Brueggemann, Larry Brueggemann Sr., Richard Brueggemann, Albert Bruno, Sheldon DeLage, Victor Doe, Paul Doyer, Richard Dugstead, Laverne Felling, Thomas Gagne, Gilbert Jenricks, Lawrence Gerard, Benjamin Hallis, Duane Hintz, James LeBlanc, Alfred Mayer, James McDonald, Everell Mersil, Lloyd Mersil, Alvin Morin, Lawrence Mornville, Joe Nice, Russell Noyes, Lester Olson, Bernard O'Malley, Donald Page, Harvey Page, Morris Page, Ronald Parody, Tony Payment, Ray Paris, Ronald Peterson, Julian Poirier, Ambrose Reese, Roger Riel, Stanley Rezavi, Boyd Sabrin, Leroy J. Sabrin, Paul Stahl, Luger Tugas, Regis Tugas, Frederick Tupin, Napoleon or Nap Varon, Floyd Wilson. From the Brooks Presbyterian Cemetery, the Auxiliary, Naomi Althoff, Karen Fossell, Clara Helly, who's a Navy veteran as an auxiliary member, Heidi Matson, Donna Paulin, Ruth Wilkins. And from the Legion, Arnold Arlt, August Burke, Alan Fossell, Ed Greenwall, Arthur Hagee, Henry Hagee, Alan Hansen, John Helly, Lyle Johnson, Walter Katsky, Fred Keeler, Herman Meyer, Russell Pollan, Milo Parsley, Fred Stahl, Paul Wilkins. And from the Finnish Lutheran Cemetery, Auxiliary, Amelia Eskley, who is also a Navy veteran, Fern Eskley, Lena Eskley, Rosemary Eskley, Alma Hansen, Jean Mott. And from the Legion, Lawrence Carpenter, Edward Eskley, Edwin Eskley, Craig Eskley, Leo Eskley, Martin Eskley, Melvin Eskley, Arthur Hansen, Orlando Horn, Roger Hughes, Russell Hooterry, Jean Capula, George Capula, Olive Capula, Robert Capula, Will Joe Capula, Andrew Kella, Buford Lawson, Hubert Mott, Eddie Matson, Roger Matson, Rhino Ray Ninonen, Frank Nurmi, Roy Roman, Merle Wedger. From the Ebenezer Lutheran Cemetery, Auxiliary, Elizabeth Pugh. From the Legion, Bernhard Ralsted, Kenneth Dahl, Knut Evenson, Ole Myram, Vidor Myram, Joanne Wedul, who is a Women Army Corps veteran, Morris Nelson, Alex Neslin, Alvin Olson, Arthur Olson, Eddie Olson, Oscar Royslin, Thomas Royslin, Elma Solberg, Orville Stennis, Miles Swanson, Clarence Sertveit, Jorgen Sertveit, Vernon Wedul, Dennis Wild, Leslie Wild. From the Clearwater Lutheran Cemetery, Elna Brecky, Lee Halverson, Lily Halverson, Clara Johnson, Mary Johnson, Lily Lee, Adela Peterson. And from the Legion, Donald, Donnie Brecky, Wilmer, Willie Brecky, Patrick Culkins, Delano Halverson, Nels Halverson, who was a Civil War veteran, Clarence Johnson, Russell Johnson, Duane Nelson, Walter Peterson, Nels Ralsted, Joe Tishard, Paul Wicks. And from the Clara Cemetery, Auxiliary, Stella Erickson, Alta Peterson. And from the Legion, Emil Christofferson, Elmer Erickson, Helge Larson, George Peterson, Herbert Peterson, Lowell, Tommy Peterson, and Stanley Rose. In Fort Snelling, auxiliary members, Lorraine Hoven, Florence Norby. And from the Legion, Henry Althoff, Conrad Berg, Henry Berg, Karsten Fossen, Kenneth Hoven, James Yeager, Swandra Kella, Robert Laniel, Marlon Matheny, and Leroy Norby. This next section are the people who have died in conflict. Conrad Berg, Henry Berg, Roger Bernier in Vietnam, Karsten Fossum, Vernon Groom, Willard Malowitz in the Prodigal Son airplane, Raymond Martin, Henry Nelson, Lester Norby, and the invasion of Omaha Beach, John Noyes, Moreland Preby, Llewellyn Pugh, and Gus Wickstrom, who is now buried at sea. Veterans that are buried elsewhere. Throughout my breaks, I hope you have time to reflect. Again, veterans that are buried elsewhere: Ingval Berg in Oregon, Wilhelm Berg in Oregon, Willard Bergeron, St. Francis Xavier in Oakley, Robert Blumke, St. Francis Xavier in Oakley, William Bothman, Greenwood and Thief River Falls, Joe Bushy in Oakley, Leonard Brecky in Oak Ridge Cemetery, Brett Bushell, who was cremated, Dick Dalzell, Greenwood in Thief River Falls, Keith Demra, Oakdale, Crookston, Jesse Ducamp, Greenwood, Thief River Falls, George Erickson, Grand Forks, North Dakota, Arvo Escalay in Nashwauk, Minnesota, Ray Escalay in Gently, Minnesota, Leonard Fair, who was cremated, Francis Frank Ford, St. Joseph's Catholic in Red Lake Falls, Harvey Gagne, St. Anthony's in Terrebonne, Harold Giske in Bethany in Thief River Falls, Lawrence Granum, Fort Ripley, Minnesota, Merle Gustafson, St. Hilaire Community Center, Harvey Hansen, Los Angeles VA Cemetery, Roy Hansen in Holt, Minnesota. Gus Hedin, Asphalt Lutheran, Boston. Donald Hess Sr., Oak Grove, Red Lake Falls. Floyd Hess, Oak Grove, Red Lake Falls. Ivan Hess, Oak Grove, Red Lake Falls. Robert Hintz, St. Francis in Oakley. Stanley Hufsted, Salem Lutheran Cemetery in Oakley. Bill Hull, Salt Lake City, Utah, who was a World War I veteran. Duane Howard at the National Cemetery in Fort Sam Houston, Texas, and his military time was in U.S. Army in Vietnam. Merle Jesme, Oak Grove Cemetery in Newfolden. Bert Johnson, Forest Hill Cemetery in International Falls. Arvid Kella in Duluth, Minnesota. Keith Butch Cruz, he was cremated. Ted Luckashear, Red Lake Falls. Michael LaFave, he was cremated. Kenneth Lassard, St. Francis Xavier in Oakley. Douglas Maney in Arizona. Hank Ninonen in Wisconsin. John Ninonen, Chicago, Illinois. Larry Ness, Greenwood, Thief River Falls. Harold Norby was cremated. James Norby was in New Hampshire. He's laid to rest in New Hampshire. Raymond Novak, St. Anthony's in Terrebonne. Robert Page, Prior Lake. Stephen Paquin, St. Francis Xavier in Oakley. Ernest Parody, St. Anthony's in Terrebonne. Robert Parody, Little Rock, Arkansas. Mark Parody, St. Anthony's in Terrebonne. Tom Parody, St. Anthony's, Terrebonne. Ernest Peterson, Evergreen, Red Lake Falls. Dean Shanor, buried in Arizona. William Simpson, Oak Grove Cemetery, Red Lake Falls. Clarence Sletton, who was cremated. Tom Smith at the Calvary Cemetery, St. James, Minnesota. Virgil Sorensen, Salem Lutheran Cemetery in Oakley. Kern Tillman, Fairhaven Cemetery in Santa Ana, California. Walter Toulouse in Sauk Rapids, Minnesota. Norbert Van Lith, buried in California. Elvin Westerlin, Oak Grove, Red Lake Falls. Ray Westerlin in Newfolden. Buster Wicks, St. Francis in Oakley. Harold Wickstrom, buried elsewhere. Victor Wickstrom, buried elsewhere. Robert Wright, cremated in Aurora, Minnesota. Duane Zimple, Oak Grove in Red Lake Falls. Auxiliary members buried elsewhere. Judy Ingesether at Calvary Cemetery in Winger, Minnesota. Evelyn Erickson, who was cremated. Jean Escalay in Gently, Minnesota. Fern Hess in Oak Grove, Red Lake Falls. Marianne Gagne, St. Anthony's in Terrebonne. Agnes Gieske in Bethany, Thief River Falls. Becky Jesme, Oak Grove in Newfolden. Alexine Lacassiere, Red Lake Falls. Eleanor Liskey, St. Anthony's in Terrebonne. Myrtle Malwitz, Oak Grove, Red Lake Falls. Crystal Malwitz, St. Anthony's in Terrebonne. Doreen Nord, buried elsewhere. Harriet Hess Norman, Oak Grove, Red Lake Falls. Irma Normandin, Calvary Cemetery in Crookston. Dorothy Peterson, Evergreen in Thief River Falls. Marjorie Shanor, buried in Arizona. Helen Simpson, Oak Grove, Red Lake Falls. Jolene Simpson, Oak Grove Cemetery, Red Lake Falls. Inez Norby Tarivo, buried elsewhere. Esther Walter, Evergreen, Red Lake Falls. Anna Wickstrom McCourt, a Navy veteran, buried at the Dallas Fort Worth, Texas, the National Cemetery at Fort Worth in Texas. And one correction that I would like to make, Dorothy Peterson, Evergreen Cemetery, not Thief River Falls, but Red Lake Falls. This concludes the honor that we have for those who have gone before us. I now call on our chaplain, Les Hofstad.
Be gracious unto us, O God, and bless us. As we depart this place, stretch forth your hand for protection and guard our country, that we may be devoted to your service, and that may you defend us by your power. Amen.
Sergeant at Arms, rifle volley.
Guard. Ready. Hey. Fire. Reload. Hey. Fire. Reload. Hey. Fire. Point. Point. Freeze head. Hold it. Hold it. Whoo. That is, fall out.
Before we close, two special acknowledgments. One of them is we certainly thank Second Lieutenant Eskley for being with us today. Thank you again for your presentation. And secondly, I'd like to alert all of us that are present here to take note of the cross assembly, the crosses that are here to commemorate today. They were a 2000 Eagle Scout project by now Father Matt Schmitz, who has become a local priest. And I just want to, for all of us, to reflect the meaning behind the crosses.